Hey, welcome back. We are on Chapter 9, Chart Dynamics on the Heavenly Spheres with Helena Avalar and Luis Ribeiro. Go buy the book. So you can open it up to page 140 with me and read along. We are at the chapter title or section title, Prohibition of Light. A prohibition of light occurs when a third planet interferes in the perfection of an aspect between two others, impeding its realization. Prohibition exists when, example 1, planet A applies to planet B, but before it can reach it, it first forms an aspect with planet C. Thus, planet C impedes planet A from communicating with planet B. For example, suppose Mercury at 5 degrees of Leo and Jupiter at 10 degrees of Libra are the significators. Mercury applies by sextile to Jupiter, but before it can complete the aspect, it forms a square with Mars at 7 degrees Scorpio. In such a case, oh my god, sorry, excuse me. In such a case, Mars prohibits the significators from binding each other and blocks their action. Yawns can be so intense. Let's see, planet A applies, example 2. Planet A applies to planet B, but before it can reach it, it is aspected by planet C. For example, suppose Mars at 15 degrees of Leo and Saturn at 20 degrees of Taurus are significators. Mars is applying to Saturn by square, but before it can complete the aspect, Venus, which is at 12 degrees Sagittarius, aspects it by trine. In such a case, Venus, the faster of the three, prohibits the action promised through the square of Mars and Saturn. I mean, is that such a bad thing with Venus messing with the square between the malefics? Okay, planet A applies to planet B, but before it can reach it, planet C aspects planet B. For example, Mars at 15 degrees of Aries and Jupiter at 25 degrees Leo are significators. Mars applies by trine to Jupiter, but before it can complete the aspect, Mercury at 14 degrees Scorpio completes a square to Jupiter. And in this case, the faster Mercury prohibits a connection between the two significators. There are many variations of prohibition, some of which are given specific names by some authors. But the main idea to keep in mind is that in prohibition, a third planet impedes in one way or another the realization of an aspect between two other planets. A simple example of prohibition of light from horary astrology can be seen in the question about relationships. Consider the chart for this question. Will she date me? The ascendant of the chart is at 5 degrees Aquarius. In this case, the significator for the querent is Saturn, ruler of the ascendant, located at 15 degrees of Leo. The significator of the quesidid, the woman in question, is the sun, which is the ruler of the descendant, located at 5 degrees Aries. The sun, her, looks to be applying to a trine to Saturn, him, suggesting that they will date. However, a closer look reveals that the sun will not complete its aspect with Saturn because it will first form a trine with Mars at 9 degrees of Sagittarius. We can therefore say that she, the sun, will initiate a relationship with the person represented by Mars and will not end up dating the person who posed the question, Saturn. Frustration of light. Frustration of light is a variation on prohibition. It occurs when planet A applies to planet B, but before the aspect is completed, B makes an aspect to C. One can say that planet A is frustrated in its course of action. For example, suppose Mercury at 15 degrees Gemini and Mars at 22 Aquarius. Significators. They are the significators. In this case, Mercury is applying by trine to Mars. But before it can complete the aspect, Mars perfects to a conjunction with Saturn at 25 degrees Aquarius. We say then that the connection between Mercury and Mars was frustrated. Reformation of light. Um, Reformation occurs when two planets are applying to each other. But before they can complete the aspect, the faster planet changes direction, thus impeding the aspect from completion. For example, suppose Mercury is at 14 degrees Virgo and Saturn at 18 degrees Cancer. Okay, there they are. Mercury applies to Saturn by sextile. But before it can complete the aspect, Mercury stations and enters retrograde motion at 16 degrees Virgo. In such a case, the aspect never completes, which means the action regresses and is not realized. Reformation may be considered a subset of prohibition in that involves only two planets and wherein the agent of impediment entails a change in one of the planet's direction. As another example of reformation from horary astrology, consider this question: will we reconcile? It was posed by someone who recently ended a relationship. In this chart, the ascendant is at 18 degrees Aries. The significator of the querent in this case is Mars, ruler of the ascendant. The significator, it's located at 10 degrees of Scorpio. The partner is represented by retrograde Venus, ruler of the descendant, at 14 degrees Scorpio. In its retrograde movement, however, Venus is applying to a conjunction with Mars, which suggests a reunion of the couple. However, Venus stations and returns to direct motion at 13 degrees Scorpio before it can complete its conjunction to Mars. Because it is faster, Venus begins to distance itself from Mars as soon as it turns direct. Mars, moving more slowly, is unable to catch up. We can therefore conclude that the reconciliation between the couple does not take place. At first, the partner seems interested in returning his ruler's retrograde, but then changes his mind and distances himself or themselves. The planetary interactions presented here are the most important ones you will encounter. There are variations on these, and some have different technical names. However, what is most important is to come away with an understanding of planetary motion and that the chart is always a mirror of action. Assisted and besieged planets. In certain circumstances, the aspects have a direct impact on the capacity of the planet to express itself, at times amplifying that expression greatly, and at others hindering it. This happens when soft aspects are combined with benefic planets, or when hard aspects are combined with malefic planets. These two extreme cases of this type of interaction, assistance and besiegement. Assistance. I wonder if that's like bonification or if that's separate. Assistance. When a planet separates from one of the benefics and applies to another, it is said to be assisted. That is bonification. It's funny how many terms there are for the same thing. In assistance, only the conjunction, trine, and sextile are considered. The conjunction is the most powerful. As the name itself indicates, assistance requires a situation in which the planet, or whatever it signifies in the chart, has external help. Assistance suggests positive circumstances with the possibility of success. For example, Mercury is at 14 degrees Leo, Venus at 12 degrees of the same sign, and Jupiter at 16 degrees Sagittarius. Mercury is separating from a conjunction to Venus and applying by trine to Jupiter, thereby being assisted by the benefics. I want to look at that. Mercury is at 14. Venus is at 12. So it's in between this like conjunction and trine to Jupiter. Mercury separating from a conjunction to Venus and applying to a trine to Jupiter, thereby being assisted by the benefics. Anything that is signified by Mercury in that chart, an individual event or action, is therefore surrounded by good conditions. Besiegement. Besiegement is the opposite of assistance. A planet is besieged when it separates from one of the malefics and applies to another. The besiegement, only in the conjunction, square, and opposition are considered the conjunction is the most powerful. Just as when a city is besieged, the planet experiences difficult circumstances from which it will have a difficulty escaping. It is comparable to the proverbial expression of being stuck between a rock, Saturn, and a hard place, Mars. The planet in anything it signifies in the chart is surrounded by adverse circumstances. For example, consider Mercury at 20 degrees Sagittarius. Mars is at 18 Virgo, and Saturn is at 25 degrees Pisces. Is that over here? Yes. Okay. So we have Mercury at 20 degrees Sagittarius. We've got a square. Mars is at 18 Virgo and Saturn 25 Pisces. In this case, Mercury is separating from a square to Saturn and also applying by square to Mars. Everything that Mercury signifies in this chart is encountering serious difficulties. Some authors consider the sun to be the only exception to the besiegement rule because they believe the sun cannot be besieged, or at least by conjunction, because of its inherent power. In such a case, it is the sun that consumes the planets that are in conjunction with it, concealing their action. I just realized my chart, I have a trine between Mercury and Mars, and it looks like Mercury's applying to a sextile to Venus, but no, it's it goes retrograde. It was born in a station, and so it's like leaving and going towards Mars at the same time. Left Mars, going back to Mars. Fun times. Examples of assistance and besiegement. There is an example of assistance in the chart of the poet and writer Edgar Allan Poe. The moon at 9 degrees, separating from the conjunction to Venus at 9, and applies to a conjunction of Jupiter at 16. All the planets are in Pisces, close to the cusp of the 5th house. Since the moon is on the 5th house cusp and rules the ninth, it suggests that this assistance will benefit the matters relating to leisure and pleasure, 5th house, as well as learning, publishing, and travel, 9th house. Nevertheless, it should be noted that the moon and Venus square Saturn. Let's see. The moon and Venus square Saturn. Which also suggests some difficulties in this area. The benefits would therefore at times be marked by reversals, impasses, and losses. In effect, Poe's life was always met with difficulties, and his literary success came about only after his death. Since since Saturn is located in the 1st house, the individual, these setbacks may have originated from Poe's own actions, which is corroborated by Mars in a very debilitated state in the 12th house. Many of Poe's problems were in fact tied to his propensity for alcohol, which would eventually lead to his death. So moving on to Jim Morrison. The chart of Jim Morrison, lead singer of The Doors, illustrates besiegement. The sun is at 15 degrees of Sagittarius, is separating from an opposition to Mars at 11 degrees Gemini, and is applying to an opposition to Saturn at 23 degrees Gemini. Bad hair day. The sun is located in the 10th house and rules the 7th house, indicating areas affected by besiegement. In effect, the fame and success, the 10th house, achieved by Morrison were marked by polemics. Some of his musical performances were actually interrupted by the authorities, and his conduct on stage condemned for his lack of decency. His personal relationships, 7th house, were equally marked by conflict and enmity. As seen from these examples, cases of assistance and besiegement must always be examined within the larger context of the rest of the chart. Only in this way can their expression be fully seen in a specific chart, as well as their relative weight in the life of the native. And since we're 15 minutes, we will save reception for the next video. Thanks, bye.